A defenseless puppy stands alone in a desolate field, surrounded by dozens of crows poised to strike. At the last second, a powerful figure charges in, scattering the flock in chaos. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. A vulnerable German Shepherd pup, just a few weeks old, stood isolated in a vast field, his little frame quivering. Too young to grasp the peril, too feeble to flee, and too naive to sense what loomed ahead, he was defenseless. Then dark shapes emerged. Scores of crows spiraled overhead, their ebony wings cutting through the air. They settled around him methodically, purposefully, tightening their circle from every direction. Their pointed beaks gleamed, their gazes fixed on him like predators eyeing their quarry. The pup let out a faint whine, retreating a single step. Yet there was no escape, no savior in sight. The crows flared their wings, emitting chilling screeches. The assault was moments away. Then something astonishing, something beyond imagination, unfolded. It flipped everything in a heartbeat. Stick around to the finish. This tale will stun you. The boundless field sprawled under the afternoon sun, golden blades swaying softly in the breeze. It was silent, unnervingly so. No birds sang, no leaves stirred, just a haunting calm that felt out of place. And at the heart of that void stood a fragile German Shepherd puppy, all alone. Barely a few weeks old, his slight form was delicate and frail, his coat still plush like infant down. His ears, not yet standing tall, flicked faintly as he tried to comprehend his surroundings. This wasn't his place. He had no clue how he'd arrived here. Worse still, he had no idea how to get away. For the past hour, he'd roamed without aim, his small paws stirring dust as he sought something. Anything, recognizable, but there was nothing. Only the unending golden grass in the vast sky above. Then the heavens shifted. A glimmer of motion overhead snagged his notice. The first shadow streaked across the field, then another, and another. The pup gazed upward, his guileless eyes mirroring the swirling cluster of dark wings looping above. At first, he didn't grasp it. He cocked his head, his droopy ears twitching. What were they? Why were they staring at him? Then they started to drop. The first crow touched down 10 feet off, then another, and another. Their glossy black eyes pinned him, unwavering. Their keen beaks clicked quietly, as if murmuring to one another, probing the air, assessing, plotting. The pup edged back a step, his tail tucking slightly beneath him. The crows advanced. One shuffled closer, its talons scraping the parched grass. Another beat its wings once, a signal. The pup let out a timid, unsure yelp. He was still too young to feel terror as a grown dog might. Yet deep within his small chest, some primal urge screamed at him to bolt. So he pivoted. That's when the assault began. The lead crow charged, wings flared wide, its razor-sharp claws slicing through the breeze. The pup yelped, staggering backward as the bird swooped mere inches from his nose. Another crow darted in, its beak snapping just short of his ear. Fear flooded through him. He tried to bolt, but they were too numerous. The crows acted as one, leaping, thrusting, cutting off every escape route. Their inky feathers rustled like withered leaves, their cries erupting into a wild, piercing cacophony. The pup whimpered, his frail frame quaking. The biggest crow beat its wings, lifting off the ground, then plunged straight toward him. The pup squeezed his eyes shut. Suddenly, a thunderous growl ripped through the silence. Something enormous slammed into the field. A flash of fur, a surge of strength and might. Chaos erupted. The crows screeched in panic, wings thrashing as a mature German shepherd stormed into their midst like a tempest. Jaws clicked shut. Feathers flailed as the birds scattered in every direction. The pup's eyes snapped open. Looming above him stood a war-torn shepherd, his rich brown fur glinting in the sunlight. His lips peeled back, revealing deadly, shining teeth. The crows attempted to rally. One swooped at the shepherd, but with a quick lunge he struck, his mighty jaws locking onto a wing. A spine-chilling scream pierced the air. The rest of the crows faltered. They wheeled around. Their lethal unity crumbled, and in a frantic blur of dark wings, they took flight. Quiet settled over the field at last. The massive shepherd stood motionless, chest rising and falling heavily. He scanned the sky, waiting, ensuring they were truly gone. Then gradually he faced the pup. The little dog gazed up in wonder, his small form still trembling. The shepherd regarded him for a prolonged moment. In a low, steady voice, gruff yet gentle, he said, "This isn't a safe place for you." The pup blinked. Tentatively, he edged forward a step, and the big shepherd didn't halt him. The towering German shepherd stood like a monument, his eyes fixed on the quivering pup before him. The little one paused, his body still hunched, tail tucked tight against his underside, heart racing. He didn't recognize the stranger, yet he'd just been rescued by him. The large shepherd stepped closer, deliberate and slow. "You shouldn't be out here by yourself," he said, his tone deep and resolute, but not harsh. The pup flinched at the sound, ears flattening. The older dog let out a quiet breath, his keen gaze sweeping the sprawling field. The crows had vanished, for the moment, but the sun was sinking lower, signaling more threats on the horizon. Coyotes, rogue dogs, or worse. He turned back to the pup. "Where's your family?" The small shepherd stayed silent. Not out of defiance, but because he had no answer. He dipped his head, ears flickering with uncertainty. The big shepherd huffed softly. "Typical," he grumbled under his breath. His piercing eyes softened a touch. "You're lost, aren't you?" The pup hesitated, then offered a faint nod. A shift passed over the older dog's face. Familiarity, empathy. He understood that loneliness. The big shepherd examined the pup closely. He was so young, far too young to be on his own. His coat was still plush and downy, his paws a bit too big, his movements awkward, his ribs faintly visible under his thin fur. He hadn't eaten in days. The older dog's jaw tightened. "Come with me." The puppy froze, his little legs locked in place. The big shepherd glanced back, waiting. "I won't ask again," he said. "If you stay out here, you won't survive the night." The wind rustled the tall grass around them. The puppy looked around as if trying to decide whether to trust him. But what choice did he have? He was alone. No food, no shelter, and the big dog had just saved him. The puppy swallowed hard, then took a shaky step forward, then another, and another. The big shepherd didn't stop him. When the pup finally reached his side, the older dog gave a single approving nod. "Stay close," he said. "Stay with me," he said. Then without further ado, he pivoted and began to stride away. The pup stood rooted for a second before scrambling to follow. Their trek was sluggish. The pup's stubby, wobbly legs faltered as he strained to match the pace. The larger dog moderated his steps, casting occasional glances back. Night was closing in. The chill deepened. The night's chorus, crickets, far-off howls, and the stirring of hidden critters grew more pronounced. The pup stuck near, his little paws tapping the earth. He didn't know their destination. Yet for once, he wasn't solitary. After what seemed an eternity, the big shepherd eased up. "We've arrived," he announced. The pup peered up at him, then shifted his gaze. What met his eyes stole his breath. Tucked between two towering trees stood a modest, deserted shack, its weathered wooden sides etched by time. The door hung slightly askew, but within, a faint dancing flame cast a cozy glow against the gloom, and the aroma of parched straw mingled with a subtle, meaty tang wafted out. Above all, it radiated safety. The big shepherd crossed the threshold first. The shack was humble, but it was a refuge. A tattered blanket rested in one corner. Nearby, a dented tin bowl by the fire held bits of meat and bones. The pup lingered at the doorway. The older dog glanced over. "So? Coming in?" The little shepherd edged forward cautiously, warmth enveloping him instantly. His coat still bore the evening's chill, drawing him nearer to the hearth. His nostrils flared. The scent of sustenance intensified. His empty stomach twisted sharply. The big shepherd caught it. Silently, he pushed the bowl his way. "Eat," he instructed. The pup didn't pause. He nibbled tentatively at first, then took another bite. The meat was coarse and chewy, yet to him it was a delicacy beyond compare. The big shepherd observed in silence. Moments later, he exhaled and settled by the flames. "I'll stand guard," he muttered. The pup glanced up, chewing deliberately. There was an air about this dog, unique. He wasn't some random wanderer. He'd endured out here for ages. And now, for some reason, he'd opened his space to him. The little shepherd savored his final morsel and nestled by the fire. For the first time since awakening in that barren field, fear didn't grip him. The fire popped gently, throwing shifting shadows across the shack's walls. Heat soaked into his fur, coaxing him into a sleepy fog. After what felt like ages, he wasn't shivering. He extended his small paws toward the warmth, basking in it. His stomach, full at last, no longer gnawed at him. Yet despite weariness pulling at him, sleep eluded him. Not quite yet. His dark, tiny eyes darted to the big shepherd resting near the hearth. The older dog lay motionless, head on paws, ears flicking faintly as if attuned to lurking threats. He'd said little since their arrival. Questions churned in the little shepherd's mind. Who was this stranger? Why did he dwell out here, solitary? And why? Had he rescued him? The pup shifted, voice timid. "Are you going to abandon me?" The big shepherd's ears twitched. Silence stretched on. Then with a soft exhale, he replied, "No." The pup blinked, struck by the firmness in his tone. A knot in his small chest unraveled. He curled tighter, eyes drooping. "Good," he whispered faintly, and for the first time since he had been abandoned, he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning light streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls. The little shepherd stirred, blinking the sleep from his eyes. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the scent of the cabin, wood, fire, and the faint musk of the older dog brought it all back. He yawned, stretching his small limbs, and looked around. The large shepherd was already up. He crouched by the entrance, his wide frame rigid, staring intently at the world beyond. The pup paused, then shuffled nearer. A chill from the morning breeze sent a quiver through his small body. The older dog sensed it, but kept his gaze forward. "A storm's brewing," he muttered. The pup cocked his head. "What's a storm?" The big shepherd let out a dry chuckle, devoid of cheer. "You'll see soon enough." The sky past the trees had turned shadowy, the air thick and oppressive. Thunder growled faintly in the distance. The pup's ears flicked at the noise. It made his fur bristle. He inched closer to the big shepherd, eyes on the heavens. "What's your name?" The words tumbled out unbidden. The big shepherd turned to him at last. His amber eyes were inscrutable for a beat. Then with a soft exhale, he said, "Rex?" The pup blinked. "Rex." The older dog's focus drifted back to the woods. "Names don't carry much weight out here," he grumbled. "But that's what they called me." Once the pup's ears perked up. "Once what?" Rex stayed quiet for a long stretch, then rose, loosening his taut muscles. "Let's move," he said. "We need food before the storm strikes." The pup yearned to probe further, but Rex's tone hinted it wasn't the time. Instead, he dipped his head and scurried after as the older dog ventured into the wilderness. The wind sharpened. Rex glided through the trees with ease, his steps hushed and precise. The little shepherd faltered behind, his paws snagging on roots and rough soil. "Keep near," Rex cautioned. The pup huffed, striving to keep pace. Rex halted abruptly, his ears shot up, nostrils flaring. The pup stiffened, tracing his line of sight. Ahead, a toppled tree sprawled across the earth, and tucked beside it lay a still, small rabbit. The little shepherd's belly rumbled. Rex's gaze shifted to him. "Hungry?" The pup nodded vigorously. Rex edged forward, prodding the rabbit with his snout. It was fresh, still tepid. "Eat," he directed. The pup wavered. "I don't know how." Rex's face remained steady. "You'll figure it out." The pup gulped. He'd never tasted anything like this, but hunger gnawed at him. Cautiously, he stepped up and took a timid nibble. The flavor was odd, unrefined, yet satisfying. Rex observed without a word. When the pup finished, he licked his chops, feeling a bit sturdier. Rex gave a nod of assent. "You'll make it out here," he said, "if you're ready to learn." The pup met his eyes. A tentative warmth bloomed in his chest. "I want to learn." Rex's ears flicked. For the first time, his lips twitched upward, almost a grin, but not quite. "Then let's get moving," he said. As storm clouds swelled above, they pressed deeper into the wild together. A lone raindrop tapped the brittle leaves, then another, and another. In moments, the sky erupted in rage. Winds roared through the trees, twisting branches until they creaked under the strain. Lightning tore the sky apart, chased by a booming thunderclap that rattled the ground beneath them. The pup flinched, his tiny frame shaking as he huddled closer to Rex. The older shepherd barely blinked. "We've got to go," he said, his voice cutting through the tempest. Rain poured harder, soaking their coats, turning the earth to slimy muck. The little shepherd fought to stay with him, his small paws skidding as Rex guided them further into the woods. "Where are we headed?" the pup shouted, his words nearly lost in the gale. "Somewhere secure." The pup wanted to trust him, but with the storm raging, swallowing all other sounds, he wondered if safety even existed. Rex moved like he'd faced this 1,000 times before. Even as the rain came down in sheets, his paws landed sure and steady, his sharp eyes scanning ahead. The puppy, on the other hand, was struggling. His fur was soaked, heavy with water. The wind lashed against him, making his legs feel like they would be swept away at any second. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. Rex suddenly stopped. The puppy crashed into his hind leg, nearly falling over. The older dog didn't react. His ears were up, his body tense. The puppy stilled. Then he heard it. A sound beneath the rain. Movement. Something was out there. Rex's voice was low and firm. "Stay behind me." The puppy obeyed without question. Through the thick curtain of rain, a shadow moved. Then another, and another. Eyes, glowing yellow in the darkness. The puppy's heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't need Rex to tell him what they were. Coyotes. The largest of them stepped forward, its body sleek and starved. Its sharp eyes locked onto Rex, then flicked to the puppy. The message was clear. They had found their next meal. The other coyotes closed in, moving in a slow, practiced formation. Rex didn't move, didn't speak. He simply stood his ground. The puppy swallowed hard, his tiny body frozen in fear. One of the coyotes let out a low, hungry growl. Then they lunged. Rex exploded into motion. Faster than the puppy thought possible, he met the first attacker head-on, his powerful jaws snapping like thunder. A yelp of pain cut through the storm as the coyote reeled back, but the others kept coming. Rex spun, his teeth flashing as he bit, dodged, struck. He fought with the ferocity of a wolf, his body a blur of raw power. The puppy could only watch. Then a coyote broke past Rex. It was coming for him. The puppy's blood turned to ice. The coyote lunged, and the instinct took over. As the coyote came down, the puppy dropped low, his tiny body rolling beneath the bigger animal. The coyote missed. It slid across the slick earth, struggling to pivot. But Rex was already in position. His jaws clamped hard onto its shoulder, yanking it back with a fierce growl. The wounded coyote let out a piercing squeal before bolting into the woods. The rest wavered. One after another, they spun around and took off. Rex unleashed a deep, resonant snarl before stepping away, his chest rising and falling heavily. Rain hammered down around them. For a brief second, all was still. Then Rex faced the pup, his amber eyes fixed on him, assessing. "You stood your ground." The pup blinked, his little frame still quaking. I just reacted." Rex cocked his head a fraction. "You didn't lock up." The pup fumbled for words. Rex let out a breath, then gave a slight nod. "You're picking it up." The little shepherd gulped. A peculiar sensation took root within him. Something comforting. Something solid. For once, he didn't feel like a mere stray. For once, he felt like he could endure. Rex angled toward the trees. "Let's go. We've got to move before they return." The pup bobbed his head eagerly and trailed him into the tempest. Rain fell without mercy, soaking the soil, transforming the forest floor into a sticky, treacherous blend of mud and foliage. Every step grew weightier, fatigue pressing down on the pup's small body. Yet he pressed on. He had no choice. Rex forged ahead, sturdy and unshaken, the storm barely phasing him. The older shepherd showed no signs of wear from the coyote clash, his steady, forceful strides guiding them through the woods. The pup kept his head bowed, ears pinned back against the roaring wind. His tiny paws plunged into the mire, but he soldiered onward. He was adapting, learning to push through the chaos, to persist, to thrive. After what seemed an eternity, Rex finally eased his pace. The pup almost collided with his flank, gasping for air. His chest heaved with weariness. Rex stayed silent. He stood poised, ears alert, nostrils flaring. The little shepherd sensed it before he saw it, a change in the atmosphere. The forest parted, then refuge appeared. Before them loomed a giant, hollowed tree trunk, its roots sprawling like sturdy limbs across the earth. The interior was shadowed and dry, cloaked by twisted bark and dangling vines. It was a sanctuary carved by nature. Rex turned, at last meeting the pup's wide, wondering gaze. "We'll rest here," he said. The puppy nearly collapsed in relief. Rex stepped inside first, shaking off the rain in heavy drops before settling onto the dry dirt floor. The puppy followed, his tiny legs trembling with exhaustion. The inside of the tree smelled of earth, damp wood, and something faintly familiar: safety. The storm raged on outside, wind screaming through the trees. But inside their shelter, it was quiet. For the first time that night, the little shepherd felt warm. Rex was watching him. Even in the dimness of the tree hollow, his amber eyes gleamed. The puppy hesitated, his body still curled in exhaustion. But something inside him had changed. He lifted his head. "I wasn't scared," he said, his voice small but certain. Rex's expression didn't change, but there was something in his gaze, something close to approval. "No," he said, "you weren't." The puppy's chest swelled slightly. He had felt it too. That moment in the storm, when the coyote lunged, when his body moved before his mind did. That instinct, that power. He had faced fear and survived. Rex let out a slow breath, then finally spoke. "You remind me of someone." The puppy's ears perked. "Who?" Rex's eyes darkened slightly, but instead of answering, he turned his head, staring at the swirling shadows outside. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we move again." The puppy wanted to ask more, but his body was already sinking into sleep. As his eyes drifted closed, one last thought flickered in his mind. He wanted to be strong, like Rex. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the hollow tree, casting long golden streaks across the ground. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick with the scent of wet earth and pine. The little shepherd stirred, his small body still sore from the night before. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw him. Rex sat at the entrance, his broad frame outlined against the morning light. His ears twitched slightly, always alert, even in rest. The puppy stretched his legs and shook off the lingering sleep. His fur was still damp and matted, but he felt different, stronger. Rex turned his head slightly, acknowledging the puppy's movement. "Good," he said. "You're awake." The little shepherd sat up, blinking away the last traces of sleep. Rex stood, stretching his powerful limbs. "We move now," he said. The puppy's ears perked. "Where are we going?" Rex's golden eyes flicked toward the open world ahead. "To teach you how to survive." They traveled deeper into the wilderness, moving through thick underbrush and weaving between towering trees. The morning air was crisp, but the ground was still slick from the storm. The puppy struggled at first, his tiny paws slipping over the wet terrain, but he kept moving. Rex didn't slow for him. He didn't wait. The puppy had to keep up, and for the first time, he wanted to. The first lesson came without warning. Rex suddenly stopped, his ears snapping forward. The puppy skidded to a halt behind him, panting. Rex lowered his body, moving silently through the grass. The puppy copied him, or tried to. His small limbs fumbled, his breathing too loud. Rex shot him a quick glance. "Quiet," he whispered. The puppy bit his tongue, trying to steady himself. Then he saw it. A rabbit just a few feet away, nibbling on a patch of leaves. Rex's body was rigid, still as stone. His eyes locked onto the prey. Then movement, a single deadly step forward. The puppy held his breath. Rex's muscles coiled like a spring. And then, he struck. It was over in seconds. Rex's jaws snapped around the rabbit's neck. His movements fluid, effortless. The puppy watched in awe. He had seen Rex fight before, but this was different. This wasn't about battle. This was about survival. Rex dropped the rabbit at his feet, then turned to the puppy. "Eat." The little shepherd hesitated. He had eaten once before, with Rex's help, but it still felt unnatural. Rex saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You won't always have food waiting for you," he said. "If you don't take it, something else will." The puppy swallowed. Then slowly he took his first bite. It was raw, warm, real, and for the first time, he understood. Rex nodded approvingly. "You'll learn." The puppy met his gaze. "I want to." Rex studied him for a long moment. Then for the first time, his mouth curved slightly. Just barely. A ghost of a smile. "You will." The rest of the day was spent training. Rex taught him how to track, how to move without being heard, how to recognize danger before it was too late. The little shepherd failed often. His paws were clumsy, his instincts still raw. But each time he tried again. Rex never coddled him, but he never abandoned him either. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the puppy's legs ached from exhaustion. But deep in his chest, something burned, something new. They returned to the tree hollow, the sky painted in soft hues of orange and blue. The puppy collapsed onto the dry dirt, his small chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Rex settled nearby, his gaze fixed on the darkening woods. For a long time, neither spoke. Then finally, the puppy broke the silence. "Who taught you?" Rex's ears flicked. He didn't turn his head, but after a long pause, he finally answered. "My father." The puppy blinked. Rex had never spoken about his past, not once. And now this. The older shepherd sighed, his golden eyes distant. "He taught me everything. How to fight, how to hunt, how to survive." He exhaled sharply, and then he was gone. The puppy swallowed. Where did he go? Rex's jaw tightened. Doesn't matter. The little shepherd wanted to ask more, but something in Rex's voice stopped him. So instead, he curled up against the warmth of the tree. And for the first time since he met Rex, he didn't feel lost anymore. He wasn't just a stray. He wasn't just a lost pup. He was learning, becoming, and something deep in his chest told him he wasn't alone anymore. Not really. The night stretched endlessly over the forest, a blanket of deep blues and scattered stars. The air was crisp and quiet, the echoes of the storm long gone. Inside the hollow tree, the little shepherd stirred, his body sore from the day's training. His paws twitched slightly in his sleep, chasing dreams that felt more like memories. But something woke him. Not a noise, not a movement, just a feeling, a shift in the air. His eyes flickered open. Rex was gone. The puppy's heart jumped in his chest. He scrambled to his feet, his ears perked, his nose twitching desperately. The hollow was empty. The familiar scent of warm earth and damp bark remained, but Rex's scent was fading. He had left. The puppy spun toward the entrance, and then he heard it, a low, distant growl. His paws moved before his mind could catch up. He ran. The forest was darker than before, shadows stretching endlessly beneath the moonlight. The puppy dodged between trees, his legs burning with effort. He followed the scent, Rex's scent, weaving through the underbrush, his chest pounding. Then, ahead, a clearing, and in the middle of it, Rex, surrounded. The coyotes had returned. More of them this time, 6, maybe 7. Their eyes glowed with hunger, their bodies sleek, ready to strike. Rex stood in the center, calm but coiled with tension. The puppy skidded to a stop, his breath catching in his throat. One of the coyotes took a step forward, its teeth flashing under the moonlight. "You should have left when you had the chance," it snarled. Rex didn't move, didn't blink. His voice was calm. "I don't run." The biggest coyote let out a low, rumbling laugh. "You don't have to. We'll end this right here." The pack tensed, and then they attacked. Rex exploded into motion. His jaws snapped like lightning, teeth sinking into the first attacker's leg. The coyote yelped, stumbling back. Another leaped for him. Rex spun, his powerful frame slamming it into the ground. But there were too many. One lunged for his back, another tried to bite his leg. For the first time, Rex faltered. The puppy froze. This was it. Rex couldn't win alone. He needed help. The little shepherd's chest heaved, and then something snapped inside him. He didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't fear. He attacked. The first coyote never saw him coming. The puppy barreled into its side, knocking it off balance. His tiny teeth snapped onto its ear, biting down as hard as he could. The coyote shrieked and thrashed. Rex's head whipped toward him. For a split second, their eyes met. Then Rex moved. Together they fought, side by side. The little shepherd bit, dodged, lunged, moving purely on instinct. Rex struck with precision, his experience guiding every move. The coyotes began to panic. One by one, they fell back. And when the last one turned and fled into the night, it was over. The clearing fell silent. Rex stood still, his breath heavy, his fur bristled. His side bled from a shallow scratch, but he didn't acknowledge it. Instead, his gaze locked onto the puppy. The little shepherd panted, his tiny body shaking from the rush. Rex stepped forward. He didn't speak, didn't need to. He simply lowered his head and nudged the puppy's forehead with his own, a rare sign of respect. "You did good, kid." The puppy blinked, stunned. His tail wagged. Just once. Then Rex turned. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." They walked side by side through the forest, the scent of rain still lingering in the air. The puppy felt different. Not weak, not lost, not afraid. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was learning, becoming something more. He looked up at Rex, admiration in his eyes. And for the first time, he didn't feel like just a stray. He felt like he belonged, like he had a family, like he had a future. And as they disappeared into the trees, the night felt just a little less dark. Against all odds, the little shepherd survived. He wasn't just a lost puppy anymore. He had found strength, purpose, and a guide who would teach him how to survive. Rex had saved him. But in the end, the puppy had saved Rex too. A bond forged in the wild, built on trust, courage, and instinct. And so, this gripping tale of a tiny puppy's fight for survival and the fierce guide who stood by its side comes to an end. But it's only the beginning of the wonders nature has in store. From a fragile, helpless creature, that little pup discovered strength, resilience, and an unbreakable bond forged in the wild. Life out there is tough and unforgiving, yet it's in the face of adversity that the most beautiful things emerge. Friendship, courage, and hope. If this story touched your heart, if you're hungry for more incredible journeys from the animal kingdom, then hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel right now. Every week, we bring you fresh stories, unforgettable moments, and profound lessons straight from the wild. Join us on this adventure because stories like these deserve to be shared with the world.